Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. Before I begin, do me a favor and let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, get comfortable because you're not going to believe this one. My own daughter pushed me into the river. She looked me right in the eye, her expression a mask of cold fury, and shoved me with all her might. She thought she was solving a problem, getting rid of an obstacle to her inheritance. But what the police dragged out of that water a week later wasn't my body. It was the end of her world, and she was absolutely speechless. It all started, as these things so often do, with money, or rather, the perception of it. For 35 years, I'd run a moderately successful but grueling construction business. I was on site at dawn. I was doing payroll until midnight. I built that company with my own two hands, from a single pickup truck to a fleet of 20. My wife, Eleanor, passed away 10 years ago, and it was after that I decided to sell. The offer I got was substantial, more than I could ever spend. But I saw how the world was changing, how easily wealth could corrupt. I looked at my only child, Chloe, and her new husband, Mark, and I saw a sense of entitlement that frightened me. So I made a decision. I told them I'd sold the business for a modest sum, just enough to pay off the mortgage on our large family home and live comfortably on a fixed pension. I wanted to see what kind of person my daughter truly was when she thought there wasn't a massive pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It was a test, a long, silent, painful test that she failed more spectacularly than I could have ever imagined. They moved in with me a year after they were married. "Just until we get on our feet, Dad," Chloe had said, batting her eyelashes. Mark had nodded enthusiastically, his eyes scanning the four-bedroom house, the large yard, the three-car garage. "It's a big place for one person," he'd added, as if he were doing me a favor. I agreed, of course. My kindness has always been my weakness, or so I thought. In reality, my kindness was a carefully calibrated instrument. I wanted to give them every chance to prove me wrong. I gave them the master suite. I paid for the groceries, the utilities, the property taxes. I bought Chloe a brand new SUV for her birthday because her old car was unreliable. All of this I did for my modest pension, or so they believed. In truth, it was a fraction of the interest I earned on my investments each month. They never asked how I afforded it. They just took. Their gratitude was non-existent. It slowly morphed into expectation and then into demand. The house wasn't just a place they were staying. It became their house. My study became Mark's home office. Even though his work consisted of day trading with money, I suspected he was skimming from the household account I gave Chloe. My presence in my own home became an inconvenience. I would come into the living room to read, and they would sigh dramatically, turning up the volume on their mindless reality shows. They would have friends over without telling me, loud, obnoxious parties where I was treated like the hired help. Once, one of Mark's vapid friends asked me to go fetch him another beer. I just smiled, went to the kitchen, and got him one. I saw Mark and Chloe exchange a look, a smirk of shared amusement at the silly old man who didn't know his place. Each slight, each disrespectful glance, each ungrateful sigh was a piece of data. I wasn't just getting hurt, I was collecting evidence. The inciting incident, the moment that set the final, terrible wheels in motion, happened on a beautiful Saturday in late July. It was my 65th birthday. I had planned a small barbecue, just the three of us, down by the river that bordered the back of my 10-acre property. It was my favorite spot, a place Eleanor and I had spent countless evenings. The argument started, predictably, over the house. Chloe had been browsing online real estate listings for weeks, not for them, but for me. "Dad, we were thinking," she began, her tone dripping with false concern. "This place is just too much for you. We found some lovely senior condos downtown. You'd have a community. Activities." Mark chimed in, ever the helpful vulture. "And we could take over the mortgage here. It's the least we could do. Keep the house in the family." I looked at them, at their greedy, shining eyes. They couldn't even wait for me to die. They were trying to shuffle me out of my own home while I was still breathing. I kept my voice calm. "This is my house, Chloe. Eleanor and I built it. I'm not going anywhere." "But it doesn't make financial sense," she snapped, her mask of civility slipping. You're sitting on a huge asset that you're not using. We could use that equity to start business, to really build a life. Your life? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. What about my life? The one I spent building everything you see around you? The life that allows you to live here for free, drive a car I paid for, and eat food I buy? Mark scoffed. Oh, here we go. The I worked so hard speech. It's a different world now, old man. You can't just expect us to scrape by like you did. That was it. The old man, the dismissal of my entire life's work. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance. I stood up, my back to the river. The discussion is over, I said, my voice firm. This is my house. You're a guest here. If you don't like the arrangements, you are free to leave. Chloe's face contorted with a rage I had never seen before. It was pure, distilled hatred. You selfish bastard, she hissed. It's always been about you. Your house, your money, your rules. When are you going to get out of the way and let us live? She took a step forward. I stood my ground. Her eyes darted from my face to the river behind me. A horrible, chilling realization dawned on me in that split second. She wasn't just angry. She was calculating. We are tired of waiting, she whispered. And then she shoved me. Hard. In the chest. The world tilted. My feet left the grassy bank, and for a heart-stopping moment I was suspended in air. Then the cold shock of the river water enveloped me. My head struck something hard beneath the surface. A rock, I presumed, and a burst of stars exploded behind my eyes. The current was strong, much stronger than it looked. It grabbed me, pulling me under, tumbling me over and over. I saw Chloe's and Mark's silhouettes on the bank, watching. They didn't move. They didn't call for help. They just watched as their problem was swept away. The last thing I remembered before the world went black was the bitter taste of river water and betrayal. I woke up coughing, my lungs on fire. I was lying on a muddy bank, miles downstream. My head throbbed with a searing pain, and my body was a constellation of aches and bruises. A grizzled fisherman with kind eyes was leaning over me. He'd found me tangled in his trot line. He helped me to his truck and drove me to the nearest town, a tiny place with one motel and a diner. I gave him the few $100s I had in my wallet and told him I'd had an accident, that I just needed a rest. He didn't ask too many questions. I checked into the motel under a false name. John Smith, the oldest trick in the book. My body was broken, but my mind was starting to work. The initial shock, the grief, the profound hurt of being discarded by my own child began to cool and harden into something else. It was a cold, pure, and diamond-hard resolve. In that dingy motel room, with its flickering fluorescent lights and threadbare carpet, I experienced a moment of absolute clarity. The test was over. The results were in. My daughter, the person I loved more than anything in the world, valued my money more than my life. She was willing to let me die for it. As I lay there, watching the local news on the small, buzzing television, a report came on. A picture of me, smiling, flashed on the screen. Local man, 65, missing after tragic accident, the anchorwoman said. Then they cut to an interview with Chloe. She was weeping, clutching Mark's arm. He was my rock, she sobbed, mascara running down her cheeks. I don't know how I'll go on without him. I watched her performance, and I felt nothing. The love I had for her, the deep, instinctual bond of a father, had been scoured out of me by the river current. All that was left was a chilling, hollow space. And in that space, a plan began to form. A methodical, intricate, and deeply personal plan. My name is not my only asset. My mind is. For years, I had a contingency plan, a ghost protocol for a worst-case scenario. A second identity, complete with a passport, driver's license, and bank account, under the name of Edward Slate. It was a relic from my younger, more paranoid days in a cutthroat business, but it was about to become my greatest tool. The first call I made was not to the police, but to my lawyer, Arthur Vance. Arthur is the only person on earth, aside from my financial advisor, who knew the true extent of my wealth. Arthur, I said, my voice hoarse. It's me. I'm alive. But for the next few weeks, I need everyone to believe I'm dead. I explained what happened, leaving no detail out. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Arthur, a man I've known for 40 years, said 2 words, "What's the plan?" The plan was poetic justice in its purest form. It was about giving Chloe and Mark exactly what they wanted, and then watching it turn to ash in their hands. First, I would remain Edward Slate. I rented a clean, furnished apartment in a city 300 miles away. I needed to be a ghost. Second, I instructed Arthur to begin the legal process. Since I was missing, presumed dead, my will would come into play. My old will, the one Chloe knew about, left everything to her. The house, the pension, the savings. Arthur was to let the process begin, to let Chloe and Mark believe they were about to become millionaires. Let them get cocky, Arthur, I instructed. Let them feel the money in their hands before it's even there. Third, and this was the most crucial part, was the financial unraveling. I spent an entire day on the phone with my financial advisor, a sharp young woman named Isabel. We systematically went through every single asset. The house, I explained to her, was not in my name. It was an irrevocable living trust, of which I was the sole grantor and trustee. My death did not automatically transfer ownership. Only I could do that. I signed the documents as Edward Slate, transferring the trust's primary beneficiary status from Chloe to a series of charities dedicated to helping abandoned parents. The SUV I bought for Chloe, the title was still in my name. I arranged for a repossession company to be on standby. The generous monthly allowance she received, it wasn't a bank transfer. It was drawn from a specific investment account that I immediately froze. The credit cards in her name, for which I was the primary account holder, I called each company and reported them stolen, effective in 2 weeks' time. We built a firewall around my actual fortune, and then we laid a series of financial landmines under the life they had built on my generosity. The final piece of the puzzle was the masterstroke, the part that addressed the title of this story. For years, I had a hobby of stonemasonry. Down by the river, near where she pushed me, stood the abutment of an old, long-removed bridge. A few months prior, as a personal project, I had hollowed out a section of the stone and installed a state-of-the-art, waterproof, fireproof safe, perfectly concealed. It was my secret time capsule. Inside, I had placed a few sentimental items of Eleanor's, some old photos, and a letter to my future self. It was now going to serve a new purpose. I instructed Arthur to prepare a new set of documents, a new last will and testament that explicitly disinherited Chloe, citing her lack of familial empathy and profound materialism, a detailed financial statement showing my true net worth, running into the tens of millions. And finally, a sworn affidavit, written by me and notarized by Arthur, detailing the events of my accident, including Chloe's words and the shove that sent me into the river. I wouldn't press for an attempted murder charge. The legal battle would be too draining, and my punishment was far more elegant, but the affidavit for assault would be a permanent record of her actions. I mailed this package to Arthur, who then made a trip and placed it inside the safe in the dead of night. The trap was set. All we had to do was wait for the greed to take the bait. I spent my days quietly, reading, walking in parks, and monitoring the situation through Arthur. He told me Chloe and Mark were on a spending spree. They put a down payment on a new Porsche for Mark and a diamond monstrosity of a necklace for Chloe. They were telling everyone they were coming into a fortune. They'd already started interviewing architects to renovate my house. They were celebrating my death. The news reports continued, with the search for my body being scaled back. I was becoming a memory. A week after my disappearance, Arthur made an anonymous call to the local police department. He disguised his voice, claiming to be a former employee of mine. He told them that I was always paranoid and had often spoken of hiding my real-life savings in a secret safe by the old bridge abutment. To keep it from the tax man, he said I was worried my daughter's husband was a gold digger. It was the perfect bait. A missing man, a secret fortune, family drama. The local news station would be all over it. And they were. The next day, a news van and a police dive team were at my property. The camera zoomed in on the old stone abutment. Chloe and Mark were there, of course, giving another tearful performance. Chloe spoke to a reporter. We had no idea. If there's anything in there, we'll use it to start a foundation in his honor. It's what he would have wanted. The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. I watched a live stream on my laptop as the dive team worked. It took them 2 hours to locate and extract the heavy safe. They hoisted it onto the riverbank, a metal behemoth covered in mud and algae. The police sergeant announced they would be taking it to the station to open it in a controlled environment. Chloe and Mark looked ecstatic, their eyes wide with anticipation. They probably imagined it was stuffed with gold bars and bearer bonds. This was the moment their world began to unravel. The call came from Arthur a few hours later. "They opened the box," he said, and I could hear the grim satisfaction in his voice. The police, the lawyers, Chloe and Mark were all present. They were expecting cash. When the sergeant pulled out a stack of legal documents instead, the mood shifted. He described the scene to me. The sergeant reading my affidavit aloud, the color draining from Chloe's and Mark's faces, the financial statement being passed around, the dizzying numbers silencing the room, the new will, which named the Eleanor Grace Foundation for the Elderly as the sole beneficiary of my entire estate. My daughter was left exactly $1 for the value she placed on my life. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for them. The police opened an official assault investigation based on my affidavit. It was a local news sensation. The story changed overnight from tragic loss of beloved father to daughter pushes father into river amid inheritance dispute. Their faces were plastered everywhere. But that was just the public humiliation. The private one was far worse. The very next morning, the financial dominoes began to fall. At 9 a.m., the repossession company, a burly man named Gus, towed Chloe's SUV from the driveway of my house. She ran out screaming, but Gus just showed her the paperwork and hooked it up. An hour later, Mark tried to pay for his artisanal coffee and had his credit card declined. Chloe tried hers. Declined. They called the banks, frantic, only to be told the primary account holder had closed the accounts. The final blow landed that afternoon. A courier delivered a thick envelope. Inside was a formal notice of eviction. It stated that the property at 121 Riverwood Lane was the sole property of the Eleanor Grace Foundation for the Elderly, and that the current unauthorized occupants had 30 days to vacate the premises. It was signed by the new trustee, Arthur Vance. Their world wasn't just unraveling. It was being systematically dismantled, screw by screw, by the very person they thought they had eliminated. They had no money, no car, no credit, and soon, no home. They had built their entire life on a foundation of my money, and I had just pulled it out from under them. They found me a week later. I knew they would. Desperation is a powerful motivator. I was living in a simple, 2-bedroom apartment. Clean, modest, and completely paid for. The doorbell rang, and I saw them on the security camera. They looked diminished. Their designer clothes were wrinkled, their faces pale and drawn. I buzzed them in. They stormed into my apartment, their shock at seeing me alive quickly turning to rage. "You!" Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking. "You're alive. You did this to us. You ruined us." Mark pointed a trembling finger at me. "The police, the banks, our friends, everyone thinks we're monsters. This is all your fault." I remained seated in my armchair, a cup of tea steaming on the table beside me. I looked at them, not with anger or hatred, but with a kind of detached pity. They were like children throwing a tantrum. "My fault," I asked, my voice perfectly level. "Let's be clear. I didn't push myself into a river. I didn't spend a fortune I hadn't yet inherited. I didn't lie to the media. I didn't treat the person whose roof I was living under like an inconvenience. Those were your choices, your actions. I am not the cause of your problems. I am a consequence." I let the silence hang in the air. I watched as the reality of their situation finally began to penetrate their thick skulls of entitlement. "The house," Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. "The money. The house belongs to a trust that now benefits people who are truly in need, not people who simply want more," I explained calmly. "The car has been sold. The credit cards are canceled. The monthly allowance has been discontinued. The inheritance you were so eager to claim now consists of $1, which Arthur will be happy to mail to you." I took a slow sip of my tea. "You see, for years, I gave you everything. A home, financial security, my love. I wanted to see if you could be good people without the promise of a massive inheritance. I wanted to see if you loved me, your father, or what you thought I could give you. Now I have my answer. Chloe finally broke. She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing. Not tears of remorse, I noted, but tears of self-pity. What are we supposed to do? She wailed. We have nothing. No, I corrected her gently. You have what you've earned. You have each other. You have the opportunity to get jobs, to rent an apartment you can afford, to build a life from scratch. The life you always looked down on me for having. You have a chance to learn gratitude, humility, and the value of a dollar that you've actually worked for. In a way, I've given you a far greater gift than money. I stood up and walked to the door, holding it open. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a life to live. My life. They stared at me, speechless, their faces a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. They finally understood. They hadn't just lost the money. They had lost everything because they had never truly valued anything. They walked out of my apartment and out of my life, not with a bang, but with the whimpering sound of their own entitlement collapsing in on itself. In the aftermath, their world became very small. The assault charge stuck. Chloe received 2 years of probation and mandatory community service. And nursing home, ironically, the public humiliation drove them out of town. The last I heard, through Arthur, they were living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment 2 states away. Mark was working as a stocker at a big-box store, and Chloe was a waitress at a chain restaurant. Their flashy friends disappeared, their extravagant lifestyle a distant memory. They were forced to live the life they had so arrogantly dismissed. And me? I found a peace I hadn't known in years. The weight of their expectations, their greed was gone. I poured my energy and my resources into the foundation I named after my wife. We've built 2 state-of-the-art residential homes for low-income seniors. I volunteer there 3 days a week, not as the wealthy benefactor, but just as a man named John, who helps in the garden and plays chess with the residents. I sold the big house and the 10 acres of land. The money from the sale endowed the foundation for the next 100 years. It's doing more good now than it ever could have as a monument to my daughter's greed. Sometimes I think about that day at the river. I think about the cold water and the cold look in my daughter's eyes. There's a sadness there, a phantom limb of love for the daughter I once had or thought I had. But there is no regret. I learned a hard lesson. You can give someone everything, but you cannot give them character. You cannot make them grateful. Actions have consequences, and sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is to step back and let their children fully experience the consequences of their own choices. They wanted me out of the way. Now I am, and they're finally on their own. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's just about balance. And my world, at long last, is perfectly balanced. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it serves as a lesson. Cherish your family, but never let your kindness be mistaken for weakness. Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you all next time.